Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I do want to mention that Namaste and in la catch comes from two, what we might call ancient languages. Brahmi is the spoken Sanskrit for Namaste, and in la catch is Mayan. Namaste simply means the divine in me recognizes the divine in you, and in la catch means I am another you. So these are ancient things that have been around for a while. If we could only reframe our mindset, especially now, think of the benefits that that will bring to our everyday living, our personal and professional lives, and our relationships. So this week, we're going to be talking with an old friend, Dr. Dennis Reina, who I met years ago in what was then the American Society for Training and Development Leadership Conference in Crystal City, Maryland. So this is kind of a rekindling of our relationship, and I'm really happy to have you here, Dennis.
Well, thank you so much, Zen. You know, it's very special to spend both this time with you, and hopefully our listening audience will gain some value both from each of our conversations today.
I'm sure they will. Now I'm just going to go into your LinkedIn profile for just a minute because it was low-hanging fruit. So you're about culture change and business results through trust building with leaders, teams, and organizations worldwide. And I have to say, you do have a global perspective in the work you've done, the companies you've worked with, the success that you've had with them in trust building, which is critical for today, because you can't really do anything if you don't have trust, right?
It's foundational.
It is. Now, speaking of foundational, let's go back a little bit. So let's step in the Wayback Machine, all right? And hopefully Peabody won't get lost. When you first began this path that you're on, what were the things that triggered you internally to go this direction? And how did your outer world kind of reflect, yeah, you're on target?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. It actually all started about 48 years ago on the walls of Yosemite National Park.
Beautiful place.
I was actually, after graduating from the University of Maryland in College Park, I was traveling around the States and Canada, and I was in San Francisco on my way to Big Sur because, you know, we're talking 1972, and I had hair down the middle of my back, etc. And I talked to one person. He said, well, you ought to really check out Yosemite. It's a really cool place. So I said, okay. So I picked up, and how I would travel from place to place, state to state, you know, country to country, I was picking up hitchhikers, and, you know, and they said, well, what do you got? I said, well, I got, you know, one guy would say, oh, I got $13.57 in my pocket. He said, good, that'll buy a tank of gas back then.
Right.
We'll get from point A to point B, etc. And he said, well, you ought to really check out Yosemite. So I picked up another hitchhiker. He was actually a med student from NYU. We went into the park. He got sick. I got him a ride back out of the park. I went down into the valley, and my van breaks down. So here, after traveling, 3,286 miles around the States and Canada, and I pull in, my van breaks down. So I said, okay, I'm going to have to get a job, because I didn't have the $876 for a new transmission. That's what it was going to cost me to continue with, my old VW microbus at the time. And Monday morning, I went to back then they called them personnel offices, and HR was, wasn't into existence just yet, and they said, what do you got? And I said, well, I got a bachelor's degree in marketing from the University of Maryland. They looked at me, they said, so what else you got? So I had to dig deep. And
what's your practical skill level, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. What's your practical, and more importantly, what do you got else, And so I said, well, I was 2 merit badges away from Eagle Scout before the troop folded and said, good, you're hired. Report to the Mountaineering Center. And so I did, and I got into climbing, as in rock climbing.
Did that for about 10 years myself.
Yes, exactly. And when you're climbing the walls of Yosemite National Park or any place, but particularly when you've got your colleague on belay, you realize that you've got his life in your hands, and guess what? Vice versa.
Right.
He's got your life in his hands. And so that was really the first time that I was really fully understanding the importance of trust. Through that, and I ended up within 6 months, I was actually running the Mountaineering Center in Yosemite National Park. And for 4 years, I led climbing. I took people out climbing. And then in the wintertime, I led cross-country ski, treks. And
what a job to have. I mean, out in nature with people, the beauty of it, and the ability to pay for your transmission bill. It was an interesting way to get introduced to
climbing. Yes.
Right, and to climbing too. I mean, El Capitan is one of those, world-class climbs that everybody knows about.
Yes, exactly. And that's where you have to be the top of your game.
Absolutely.
And it took,
because your life depends on it.
Totally. And it took me years to get, to that level. I actually, though, had a near-death accident during that time frame. And that's what really taught me about trust of self. And it was so severe that I almost bled to death. And I actually ended up having to work my way to the road to find somebody to take me to the clinic, et cetera, et cetera. And I crawled on my elbows. That's how bad things were at that point. But the point is that I really learned about trust at a visceral level.
Right.
And
having an NDE myself, I understand what you're talking about. Maybe others don't, but there's a really deep level it's a combination of letting go and complete trust.
Total surrender.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Total surrender. And over the next year, because I had complications, et cetera, with the nature of this accident, that I had to trust in myself, and of course in the medical profession that was helping me. But it was a long journey back. But it was through that journey. Now we're talking now 1975. Mm-hmm. I was in California, and I was learning holistic health and actually my first master's was in holistic health education, but I was learning from some of the early pioneers, Dr. Kenneth Pelletier, and I was with Mike Spino at Esalen back, there, and learning from these masters about how I could not only my own healing, because it was, necessity becomes the mother of invention here.
Absolutely.
But it was also, I was learning about a profession that would carry me through the rest of the 70s, and more importantly, the 80s and so forth, and into the 90s.
Let me ask you a question about the holistic health aspect of it. Back then we just began to look at alternative health and practices and things of that nature. What did you find about the combination of body, mind, and spirit that holistic environment allowed you to explore and share?
Sure. Well, what I noticed, I was studying both Eastern and Western anatomy and physiology, in my studies. and eventually got my, as I mentioned, my first master's in
Mhm.
holistic health. And it was first and foremost, it was part of my own healing process.
Sure, because you had to understand your own energy systems in order to actually activate and be part of their operation, because it was a conscious thing that, once we study these things and learn more about the inner workings, I've always referred to our body as being an instrument. We just don't know how to tune it, let alone play it well.
Exactly. And I continue to tune it. Okay.
Mhm.
But I'll get to that in a moment. I back then it was really understanding and learning about Eastern and Western anatomy, physiology, nutrition, shiatsu. I also got into massage, etc. In fact, back in the early 70s, I was the first individual to bring massage therapy to the ski areas in Vermont. Oh, by the way, how did I get from Yosemite National Park to Vermont?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a gap there.
Yeah, a little bit of a gap.
That's all right.
I was running the Mountaineering Center and working with also another colleague of mine, Ned Gillette, who has passed. But we were at a ski show in Las Vegas, and we ran into Johannes von Trapp of the Trapp Family Lodge, the sound music. He was the little boy in the movie. Anyway, he invited us back to Stowe, Vermont, to run the ski touring center there. And so I ran the ski shop there, and Ned ran the ski school. And from 76 to 80, that's what I did. And I used to, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, take Maria von Trapp, as in the Sound of Music lady, skiing. And she was a hoot back then. We'd be out there skiing then, and she'd I'd say to Maria, "How was your week this week?" And she said, Denise. She called me affectionately Denisio, and because that's my Italian name. Anyway, she goes, Denisio. How was your, and of course, she'd come from with a heavy Austrian accent. And how was your week? And she would say, well, on Tuesday I had lunch with Senator so-and-so, and Wednesday I had dinner with, General so-and-so, probably, Franco, whatever, anyway, and Wednesday, anyway, she would say, and I said, wow, that's amazing, Maria, it sounds like my week. And she looks at me inquisitively, and she goes, really? And I said, yeah. On Monday, I took out the garbage. On Tuesday, I did the laundry. On Wednesday, anyway, she laughed, and she and stuff like that. But no,
how many metaphors there are there?
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's interesting with many of those who have positions like hers, where they're sought after just to have time with, and the conversations that evolve from those. I mean, so these are artisans, right, that come in, and their ability to ask the deeper questions and the critical questions are far superior than those who are expected only to talk in certain linear ways, right? And we were talking about, the jump from Colorado or California to Vermont, it's kind of a non-linear, non-local thing, and conversations are like.
Yeah, because I had never been to Vermont, right? Yeah. I didn't have any frame of reference at all.
So how did she, or how did your conversations with her, did you ever touch on those deeper aspects of life and connection, and how she saw those things?
To a degree. And of course, as you know, she wrote about that, and of course, her spiritual practice, etc., was very deep. And she would share now and then. Don't forget. Well, I should say, don't forget. Let me let you know that we're talking. She was like 76 to 80 while we're skiing. So she was focused a lot on,
Just skiing.
just skiing, exactly. And again, she wasn't grease lightning by any means, I mean, there was
Right,
one,
right.
step in front of the other and so forth. But occasionally she would share with me, etc., what she thought about this and that. But it was, it was a friendly interaction. And I remember when she passed, she was 87 at the time, and how the family, when I went to the memorial service, how the family said, mother always loved her skis with me.
That's cool. That's
That,
cool.
that was very touching. It was very,
Absolutely. Now, in those touching ways, how did that, in your transition, because you eventually got into more professional work with the trust factors, and of course, with skiing and climbing, you have to trust the people that you're with, and especially the equipment that you're using, because your lives depend on it. Now, how did that transfer or transition into the work that you're doing with the trust building now?
well, the bridge, because I think it's always important.
Mm-hmm.
The bridge was actually, so I did another 4 years at another ski area. I opened up the telemarketing program there. And so I would take, the metal edge
Put your
cross.
marketing degree to work, huh?
So for another 4 years, I would teach telemarketing, etc. In fact, they call it Telemark Tuesday. It was, and stuff, and we'd have that. But what I was doing through each of those was helping people learn. I was fascinated by learning and how people took in information, how they absorbed, how they then translated it into action. Okay, because
Well, now let me offer this too, as a reflection of where you were at the time, because in order to be interested in that, you have to really be peering into the depths of your own being and analyzing how you do it. And then, I mean, for me, it was like, okay, I'm this person that, I've got a really deep inquiry and curiosity and fearlessness in that place. Not everybody's like that. So this process of, okay, now how does everybody else process information? And then how do we create communication and conversation beyond that?
yes,
Right.
yes. Well, and so for me, I was, I think part of the learning process then is being curious, right? I was curious about how people learn and how do they grow and develop. And so my second master's was actually in organizational development. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I did that as an outgrowth. So I was in the ski business for 12 years. And and then I actually did a stint at Goddard College. We turned the school around one more time, and I was the assistant director of admissions. But again, it was all about the learning environment. And
Sure.
Goddard, back particularly in the 60s and the 70s, was very experiential and very much into experiential learning.
Right.
And I went from there, and I got an offer to run the supervisory and leadership training program for the state of Vermont. And so for 7 years, that's what I did, teaching potential supervisors going into leadership, going into managerial positions, and training them on the basic supervisory skills, what's needed and wanted in that. And it was from there, that's when I went back for my master's, and then en route to the doctorate.
Now, dealing with those people, how, going back to the trust factor, right?
Yes.
How did you find that? Because the trust in any organization or company or corporation, it really doesn't matter what the product or service is. It's the people who get the job done and the way that they get the job done. And it was kind of like, I think it's Sinek and Ferris that focus on the why. And I'm trying to remember the other author that wrote the book on how, right? Because once you get the why, then you got to figure out how.
Right.
So those two questions emerge in a lot of different answers, and especially with you're dealing with trust, because you've got all kinds of triggers and others that you have to recognize and deal with in order to move to that next, the empathic conversation first, and then the generative conversation that comes afterwards.
Exactly. Well, I wanted to help people understand, and because trust was also always both in the back of my mind, but also in the forefront, it became more in the forefront when I realized in my pursuit of my second master's in organizational development at both, and I met, by the way, my current bride, who actually just walked in, of 31 years. We began to understand this thing because we were generalists when we started out. Then 31 years ago, not too many people were researching this topic called trust. Now, of course, it's very important and relevant now, and particularly in today's world, particularly when you have people working geographically dispersed and remotely, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But, back in, the late 80s, early 90s, not too many. And we were exploring this because what we found, if you're going to transform cultures, the presence or absence of trust was always the key factor in the success or failure of those organizational cultures. So then we, really delved into, okay, what is this thing called trust? Why is it so important? And how do you build it? And more importantly, how do you rebuild it? Okay.
Right.
And that's when we've actually, we've written our books and on trust and betrayal. In fact, we've actually and we wrote the first edition in the late, we wrote the first edition in the 90s, and then the second, and we completely rewrote the second edition. And people said, well, why were you well, we completely wrote the third edition too.
Right. Well, as you go deeper and you explore more, especially because it's a simultaneity of self and others that you're exploring, and kind of figuring out how to create this, for lack of a better, harmony, right, through trust, yes, in order to move through things. And it's an arduous journey to some extent, because you're constantly recreating what you know with what you're learning.
Oh, totally, right? Totally. So we really delved into this thing to really try to understand it. And what we began to see, and we actually ended up doing 4 more years of postdoctoral research after realizing, okay, because there was stuff written on the importance of it, but nobody was talking about how. Right. How do you build it? They talked about why it's important. Okay, so that was clear. And it's becoming ever more so clearer this day and age. But they didn't talk about the how do you build it. And so that's why we actually, if I may, just this is a quick reference to our framework, our model in our book. And we talk about why do we actually build trust? We build trust if we're going to create and maintain healthy levels of trust. We need to first raise people's awareness of not only why it's important, but how it is built and broken. And what we have found, 90% of the ways it is broken are not the big things, are the minor unintentional ways that happen each and every day, but they add up, they accumulate, and they become major.
Right.
And also how to rebuild trust. So we focused on, in order to that, we needed to raise awareness and give people a common language and a shared understanding so they can begin to talk about trust-related issues and take action on them.
And that's I think the core of the moving through it is creating the conversations to allow them to communicate. I had a dear friend, mentor, 20 some odd years my senior, that's at one point was the president of the American Association for Alternate Dispute Resolution. And so he had said to me at one point that, there really is no conflict. It's just we misunderstand each other because we're talking from different dictionaries and we don't understand the other person's dictionaries. So the first thing, in order to speed up progress, you got to slow down and learn the other person's dictionary and reflect on that so that you're at least speaking a closer language together. Now, what I also found, and I want to ask you about the level of vulnerability, because this seems to be a superpower, right? When you're getting into those levels, and in order to feel safe and develop the trust, it includes vulnerability.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. I had renal carcinoma, had my right kidney out about 20 years ago. And then I had testicular cancer, the same stuff that,
Tough things to go through. And when you're facing that, it takes you to more, even deeper levels that
deeper level
people don't understand exist.
No, because it didn't make sense to me. I was eating all organic. I'm Mr., healthy,
Right.
I'm eating all organic food. I'm running, 3 to 5 miles a day or every other day. I'm, exercising I'm doing all the right things, and I got cancer. And it was so bad that, in fact, they went in, they were going to stick up my upper lobe, and they ended up cutting the whole thing out and so forth. And back then, they didn't just, do a little, they didn't have robotic and,
Right.
surgical machines. They cut you from belly button to spine to jackknot. Anyway, so the truth of the matter is and talk about, man, it really came into question, not only trust of self, but trust of the circumstances, trust of God, trust of the universe, etc. Because, hey, I'm doing all the right things and I got cancer. And
Right.
in fact, it's kind of funny because in my family, there was no history of it. There was absolutely no history generations back. And my older brother, I can remember him saying when I was lying in the hospital, and he says, well, you really pissed me off, Dennis, because now I have to put on my applications. Is there any cancer in your family? Yeah.
Right. I had the same thing. I was orphaned as a baby, adopted around 6 weeks by a wonderful family. They gave me my surname of Benefiel. And, what better one you can get? Good fidelity, right? Tough
Right.
2019, I eventually I had the opportunity to meet my birth mother. 61 years of wondering, having those deep questions. And of course, I found out I met my birth father in the late 80s. Once I found out what his name was, it was kind of bizarre. But the questions were answered, right? Sure. So she had bouts of cancer as well. I've, been totally healthy my entire life, with the exception of viral meningitis in the 80s, which was not happy or fun.
Yeah.
But here's now this family history. So mom's got, bouts of cancer. And so it gets you to wonder, okay, what are the possibilities? And where there was no thinking to begin with, based on the historical data that I had on self, right now there's this additional possibility. Still, I'm like you, I eat healthy, do the right things, exercise, and I'm blessed with great health. I don't anticipate anything else because I'm way beyond the age where she first started having her problems. But it gives you a deeper perspective, right? Exactly. So where did it take you as far as the being able to work with the circumstances and move beyond them into a healthier place?
Well, it's after I got over the why me, okay, woe is me kind of thing. Because, as I said, 2 bouts with cancer, near-death accident, shingles all over my body, the whole bit. I mean, I can go down the list, et cetera, et cetera. So I've faced quite a bit. But what I had to realize was that these are God's lessons. These are the universe's lessons for me to learn something. What's the lesson that I needed to learn? What's the path that I needed to? And so it's been always about, okay, what's the message I need to get here?
Yeah.
Obviously,
Kind of like Rilke, he says you're not going to get the answer immediately. You've got to live with it. And as you do so, and you let go of the focus of I got to find the answer, right?
Yeah.
Then life just kind of rolls it out to you over time, but you have to be patient in order and recognize that this is just a process.
No, exactly. In fact, actually, we said one of Rilke's quotes at our wedding,
Oh,
30 years ago, for sure. Maria Rilke, yes. So it was really about coming to terms. Okay, what do I now need to do? What do I now need to clean? And we were, as I said, eating well, exercise, etc. So it's clearly it's a honing process, I would have to say.
mm-hmm.
And it's what works for me, not what works for the next person, right? Because it's very personal.
Oh, absolutely. But I will maybe offer that there, what works for you is person specific. The process and the patterns that we go through internally, I believe, and from what I've seen and discussed with others, are fairly consistent. We speak of the same processes in different ways. We all use language, but we speak differently.
Yeah.
No,
exactly. Yeah. And so for me, my journey, because it is, and what's interesting, it's, and we say this the same for trust, it's a journey. Mm-hmm. Trust building is a journey. And so my journey took me through these different, I was actually very fortunate at age 25, I had the near-death accident, in Yosemite. And then, I got—
Well, it gave you a place to go through. I know you mentioned that, and our audience goes, yeah, right. So, but the thing is, in that place, you go to a sense of freedom and clarity and a unified field, if you will, to bring in quantum physics, that is of complete trust and safety.
Exactly, because I had to trust, at the core. Mm-hmm. and it was, and then each time it's another layer each time. And I had a intuitive one time says, he looked at my chart, whatever intuitives do, and they go, "Whoa, man, you definitely signed on for a lot this life." So
tell me about it.
You're clearing up a lot of past lives stuff going on. And I said, yeah, I guess yeah, right, exactly. Thank you very much.
Well, I can relate to that in that during my NDE, it wasn't traumatic. I actually had prayed to know what truth was, which had to do with my perfected form, fit, and function in the world and how reality works. And so a week later, I was asked if I was willing to die for what I believed in. And after a few moments and settling on cosmic consciousness to be what I believed in, then I exited my body and went into the light and went beyond it. I realized that when I was in the light that I could think, so I wasn't dead. So the whole death thing just kind of disappeared. And then I asked if there was more, because as an impetuous teenager, I was 18, it's 1975.
Right.
And so I'm in this indigo space with points of light around me. I recognize that they're points of consciousness, whether in body or not. I wasn't sure because I knew I wasn't. And then the voice picked back up, and among other things, told me that I was to work with these points of light in order to facilitate a new world order, that it would happen in my lifetime, that my path would be full of trials and tribulations. Right? That's the point that I always relate to you. And like, so much of an understatement. Right? But it went on to say, everything you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow.
Yes.
So when you get that kind of presence and information at that age, it sets up a completely different belief system, if there is even is one at that point,
Yeah.
to live your life by. And of
No,
course, you start talking about stuff like that at that age, people think you're nuts. Now it's like, oh, that's so cool, because we understand that there is this greater mind and connectivity and presence of living and dimensions and all kinds of stuff. Quantum physics is now reflecting what sages and saints and gurus and spiritual teachers had said for millennia, right? So you were one of those who got the opportunity early on to begin experiencing this process in a much different way than most. And you capitalized on that in sharing your expertise in building the trust building scenarios.
Well, totally. And how we, if I may, show the audience how we define trust is actually through these three dimensions. There's trust of character. We do what we say we're going to do. And that's first and foremost. And then there's trust of communication. We communicate openly and honestly with one another, and trust of capability. And people often ask us, can you have one without the other? Not really, and not for long. You need to be conscious and working all of them. Now, you may focus on one or two of the behaviors, because there are 16 behaviors in all that contribute to these. But this is the framework. We also, in our books on, both trust of character and also on rebuilding trust, we happen to, so here's our book on.
I'll have those links in the video or in the description down below. So what I want to ask you though is, okay, these are models, they're intellectual, they're descriptive. What do they feel like?
So trust is a feeling, okay? And that's the key, right? Trust is not a cognitive process. Trust is about, you have a gut feeling, and how do you, and then you have some parameters, because we can actually measure an individual's, we can measure a leader's, a 360, we can measure a team's, we can measure an organization, we can even measure customer trust. We have a suite of highly statistically valid and reliable trust measuring assessments. But what's most important is it helps, whether it be the leader or the person or the individual, to really measure and monitor how they're doing in their trustworthiness. And that, for me, is the number one asset. A leader cannot be effective if they are not trustworthy. A leader cannot do their job if people do not trust them.
Okay, so let's go back to the feeling, right? Because it's all important. And part of what you're saying, again, goes back to an ancient indigenous philosophy of the three brain system, the gut, the heart, and the head. And, modern medicine has proven that there's a lot of neurosensory capacity in the gut. Quantum physics says everything is vibration. So the gut feeling, the intuition, all of these things focus around the gut. So that's where you connect with the reality around you, and then you process through the heart and then make choices with the head, right? So in that leadership scenario, how would a leader really get a sense and build the capacity for being able to tune into the gut and respond from that place in their leadership capacity?
Well, first they have to, from the gut, they need to understand where, for example, is this trust coming? Are they doing the right things? Okay, that might be, oh, you can check in your mind, but they know in their heart of hearts.
So how would that show up in the gut? What would that sensation be?
Yeah, so for me, I feel it more in the heart. Okay, and also in the gut. I feel, there's a little tweak or a little twinge or a little, when things are flowing, it's open and honest and flowing. But when things are off, it's not quite right. It's like getting up and, sometimes your leg falls asleep or something like that, and it just,
Right.
You're not reaching a rhythm, a stride, when things are flowing, when they're in rhythm, when they're.
Well, for me in those two places, I do, I kind of stand in the middle of chaos and create order as well at times. One of the things, hats that I wear is a partnering facilitator for pre-construction team building for major building, road, bridge, and waterway construction projects. So there's a lot of agendas in the room, right, that you got to sift through and go through that process you're talking about. But when that flow is there, both in the gut and the heart, for me, the gut's just kind of, it feels okay, right? There's no disturbance. The heart kind of opens a little bit because you're feeling like, yeah, things are flowing and it's happening. So there's no reticence to move forward. There's no holding back, right? And then when those issues come up, there's a tenseness that starts in the gut. It arrives sometimes, and depending, it can feel like a sledgehammer hitting you in the gut when there's something really wrong
Or punched
or out of harmony, right? Yeah. And then there's the quivering that we have two choices on, right? Do we go to the fear-based side and say it's anxiety and something impending that it's coming? Or do we go to the quickening side of, oh, here's the anticipation of something really cool. I just need to be aware and manage that energy in order to move it to a new level rather than descend into the chaos.
Or work through it.
Right. Well, that's essentially what happens as a result. It's like, okay, here's something comes, a question or even a micro expression from another person can lead to that as you're observing, which I'm sure you do, right? So how would you handle something like that, just from a process level? Because I know individually, or maybe you can have a specific incident that you can think of where that happened and it was clear and the process evolved in a fluid way that you can describe.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to go back to our framework, because part of the part of trust of character is a whole notion around managing expectations and establishing boundaries. And sometimes when things are off, things aren't flowing, things aren't just quite clicking, things aren't quite jiving.
So kind of boundary violations at that point, right?
Could be boundary violations, could be whatever, crossing the boundary, etc. So that's important from that standpoint. Also, trusted communication, sharing information, telling the truth. Is it the truth or is it a comfortable variation of the truth? Are they spinning the truth? Admitting mistakes. It takes a big man or woman to admit, hey, I made a mistake.
Absolutely.
And
it garners more respect.
Exactly. I had a leader say two things. He said, when I admit my mistakes, it does two things. One, it shows that I'm human, and that also I'm vulnerable. And two, because you used the word vulnerable earlier, and also it gives my people permission to admit their mistakes. And I thought that was classic. And it's so true. It's like, yeah, I made a mistake, or yeah, this is, thank you so much for the correction, or thank you so much, for. So often we tend to jump into the defensive or play the victim role.
Well, we respond with the energy we feel we get hit with, right? That's the first response of a, how could I put it? A novice in this world, right? That hasn't had the experiential or developed the wisdom to understand that this is the other person, has nothing to do with me. So I'm just going to be in my place and not let them affect me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, and particularly, this also comes up when giving and receiving feedback. maybe they don't like what you're saying, that kind of thing. And
Well,
again,
and it also, words are very impactful.
yeah,
It's kind of and style um, of words and the way they're presented that can build or break relationships.
yeah, exactly. And then also, and so I trusted character and trusted communication, I believe, are the most important. Trust of capability. You can teach people if they have the character and they're open and honest and
Mhm.
transparent. You can teach somebody the capabilities, the knowledge, the skills, the now, if you're hiring them for their capability and they don't have any of the others, I get off that train real quick. Uh,
Right.
and you know it right,
Sure.
right away. But all three of those work hand in hand. And at the heart, at the core, is our capacity for trust. And that's our self-trust, basically our willingness and readiness to trust ourselves influences and impacts our willingness and our readiness to trust others. And that ebbs and flows. In fact, that's actually the topic of our next book that we're in the process of writing right now. And I would love to actually turn the tide and interview you for that next book. In fact,
I'm certainly open to it, Dennis. Um, so the practical side of it, though, can you give us an example of how you experienced it um, in the process? Because you can't really talk about another's process, right? Unless you're truly an empath. But and you may be in that position, though, what did you go through personally that gave you a really clear presence or reflection that, yeah, this works really well?
Well, I've seen it applied. Well, first and foremost, we use ourselves as, for experiencing and experimenting,
Yeah.
right? And if it works, whether it be in a personal relationship or a dual relationship. Um, and let me tell you, I get a chance to practice this each and every day. I'm married to my co-author here,
Oh, yeah. That kind of relationship it's not only imperative, but it's a real blessing to
Yeah,
have.
yes, it is. And Michelle is definitely my best friend for sure. And I'm very blessed. Um, I'm very blessed to be in a relationship with her and have for 30 years. And in fact, I just turned 71 last week. So,
Oh,
um, and
happy birthday.
thank you for sure. And, I'm planning on sticking around hopefully until 100 anyway.
Well,
But
at least.
yeah, exactly. Although the week before we were in Jamaica, and let me tell you, I I've been stung by jellyfish many, many, many times because I'm an ocean swimmer, etc.
Mhm.
Running for 27 years, and then when they took my right kidney out, and left testicle, Michelle got me into swimming, and I love it, and so we swim every day. Well, I'm on my morning swim one morning. Michelle wasn't with me at the time, and I encountered a school of 10 to 12 inch in size, a swarm of jellyfish. And I somehow came in contact with them. I tried to avoid it, but anyway, I got stung and I was at the hospital. It was so intense, so painful. I still got scars across both feet and then up my right leg. It was so intense that the doctor said that if I wasn't fit, I would have had a cardiac arrest.
Hmm.
And I mean, of course, the healthcare in Jamaica, you don't want to ever go. This is not an advertisement for healthcare in Jamaica, believe me. It's sick place, hospitals, But anyway, this was definitely, and I had to get out. I was there for 14 hours and they wanted to keep me over a couple of days. And I needed to get out of there, start my healing process
Right.
on my own and do all the the right things, the turmeric to retard the swelling and the inflammation and the possible infection, and bring it down in any way. And I wasn't able to fly. I was supposed to fly out the next morning. I didn't fly out until 5 days later because I couldn't, because of the aforementioned symptoms. And
it was yet another horrific experience to get you to center yourself again, right?
Exactly. I'm going, all right, give it to me vicariously next time, enough of these first-hand lessons, But, again, what's the lesson? What's the learning? What do I need to learn, And
Don't swim with jellyfish.
that's the superficial lesson right there for sure. Man, I've never seen, first of all, they were literally 12 inches across.
Well, those are huge. Yeah, I've been in small ones. I've been stung by small ones, but man, something that large, yeah, you're lucky.
Tentacles of over 3 feet long, that kind of thing. And that's what wrapped around my leg and that kind of thing. So it was not a fun thing, but there's always lessons. I'm still working on trying to decipher what the lesson was from that one for sure. Other than this, the surface one.
Look ahead. And so, looking ahead, let's just take that for a moment, as cursory as it is, right? Because there's a lot of elegance and wisdom and simplicity, and in cursory views. So as you're looking forward, how do you see this work that you've been doing and its effects impacting the environments that you're in? I know you've had work with Amex and Ben & Jerry's and Harvard University, Johnson Johnson, a lot of these larger corporations, which seem to be some of the challenges that we face today in their mismanagement of personnel and politics and all that kind of stuff. So how do you see that changing within those realms and the effect of trust building?
Well, first and foremost, I think trust building is absolutely critical now more than ever. And I know I said that 31 years ago, but it is so true. I think
it's an ageless bit of wisdom.
It's universal, it's ageless, and it goes back to eons in time, etc. I mean, while we've been at the forefront of as of late research, as in over the last 3 decades, obviously the need and the importance of what it is has been around for eons. But I think now, because leaders need to first trust in and of themselves, they need to have and exude the confidence and feel comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguous situations, because that's what's happening. I mean, all this is new ground. As we begin to come out of the pandemic, we need to begin to trust people more than ever. And yet, but it's not blind trust or stupidity here. We're talking about appropriate trust. All right. Trusting people's character, trusting people's communication, trusting people's capability, and what is wanted and needed to help them in their character, communication, and capability, to expand that capacity for trust. And that capacity for trust is first and foremost trusting ourselves, which expands our ability to trust in others. And so this is absolutely critical at this day and age. And just while the framework and the model, and that's one of the things that people have said, your framework, Dr. Reina, is very simple, but it's profound in its simplicity because of the depth that it takes, and not only the depth of awareness, but hey, it's not easy living this work each and every day, but it's needed and necessary now more than ever.
True, it isn't easy. However, when you practice it, the efforts become less and less tends to, or it just gets easier. It becomes not only second nature, it becomes first nature, because that's the integrity that you carry in every moment. And it's almost impossible to violate that at a certain point when you've committed to living this way. Now, how do you see this, the care and compassion and trustworthiness and the building of trust coming out of COVID?
Well, I think leaders, and in particularly the people that work for them and stuff, need to have a certain level of compassion for one another. That different people in different walks of life are carrying different, if you will, whether it be different crosses or different challenges or different circumstances. And I think that COVID did a number of things. One, it showed that we could work remotely and be very productive.
Right.
But also number two is that we need to also be very understanding and caring and compassionate of one another, because we are dealing with all kinds of different challenges in all walks of life. And, put yourself in the other person's shoes, if you will. What are they dealing with? What is circumstance? And not as an excuse, not as to let them off the hook, so to speak, but more importantly, with care and understanding for what they're going through.
Right.
And so
now the going through, the question comes up is, where's the trust level in the narrative?
what is the trust level in?
Yeah, is there a trust? Okay, so what I'm reflecting is that you've got this massive narrative, global narrative, that has basically overtaken people's lives. And most people want to believe, they want to trust in those who are leading and guiding them and things like this. Do you feel that that's a trustworthy place at this point, or that or there's a deeper level of trust that has to be rebuilt within humanity itself with each other, not necessarily the leadership that's assumed control?
Yeah. So I think that, well,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, to a degree. Okay. See if I understand.
Okay.
I think the first level of trust is more on the superficial level. And I think we do definitely need to go deeper. I think we definitely need to have each other's well-being at heart and in mind and in heart and in our gut. Because we're all in this together, man.
Mm-hmm.
We are all in this together.
No matter the beliefs we have or the decisions we've made as to whether to, be one way or another, mask, non-mask, vax, non-vax, we still have to live together and learn how to work and play and have relationships that exude, or I want to say exude, but that emulate that trust.
Yes.
And are we capable?
I think we're definitely capable. Are we willing? I think is the real question. Are we willing to go the distance? Are we willing to do the work that it will take to go the distance, to extend the care and compassion, to cut each other some slack, to give each other the benefit of the doubt, to just be, hey, we're all humans, and we're on this spaceship, and we're kind of trying to work it out. Yeah.
Well, and there's people like you and others who have done the work for decades that seem to be here and present and prepared to help in this transition. And I really do appreciate your time today, Dennis, and the exploration that we had, the wisdom that you shared and your life experiences that I'm sure others can relate to and maybe look at themselves in different ways that help them to grow as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, my experiences, as part of my trust building journey, okay, and the challenges with that's all part of my own trust building journey. But we all have challenges. We all have.
They're shared journeys, and we're all here together.
Exactly. And I so much appreciate this time with you, Zen, and hopefully our conversation may shed some light or even some understanding, if not some wisdom on uh,
Sure.
to others. And
And
so,
I'll have your materials listed in the description below. So again, Dennis, thank you so much. And namaste and in la catch. Thanks for watching One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I'll see you next time.